Welcome to this explainer on the ELAR Enjoying Life After Retirement Sleep Framework. Today, we're going to completely reframe how you think about rest. We are transforming it from a passive necessity into a highly actionable framework for cognitive longevity and physical vitality. And trust me, whether you're retired or not, these principles absolutely apply to peak performance at any stage of life. So, let me ask you, is your sleep just a passive shutdown or an active performance state? Because as we're about to discover, modern neurobiology proves your nightly rest is actually a meticulously orchestrated biological construction site. It's a highly active metabolic process that you can absolutely control and optimize. Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to establish the architecture of your sleep, tour the light, deep, and REM phases, look at some optimization protocols, and finally build you a concrete 24-hour blueprint to actually master your rest. Let's kick things off with part 1, the architecture of sleep and the biological forces dictating your night. You know, every single night, your brain traverses 4 to 6 ultradian cycles, and these are dictated by two opposing but totally complementary forces. On one side, you've got process S. This is your homeostatic sleep drive. Think of it as the biochemical pressure of adenosine, just building up as your cells use energy throughout the day. And then, on the other side, you've got process C, which is your circadian rhythm, essentially your brain's master clock perfectly synced with the solar day. Now, when that mounting adenosine pressure perfectly aligns with your biological clock, boom, the sleep gate opens. And once that gate opens, your night gets divided into some very distinct physiological territories. Light sleep actually makes up the vast majority of your night, about 55%. But the rest of the time, it isn't evenly distributed. Deep sleep is heavily concentrated in that first third of your night, while REM sleep progressively lengthens out and totally dominates those final hours before your alarm goes off. Moving right along to section 2, let's look at light sleep, the gateway and weaver. We're talking about the active bridge of stages N1 and N2. So we start with stage N1. This is that super fragile threshold right between being fully conscious and unconscious. Here, your alert beta waves get swapped out for slower theta waves, creating this hyper-associative twilight zone. And it's wild. Research actually shows that people allowed to drift into this N1 state are 3 times more likely to solve complex problems that require a flash of insight. It's literally a creativity engine. Brilliant minds like Thomas Edison historically exploited this exact state to spark out-of-the-box ideas. Then we drop down into stage N2, and this is where your brain starts generating these fascinating waveforms called sleep spindles. These are brief little bursts of high-frequency activity, and they serve a really cool dual purpose. First off, they act like a sensory gate, literally blocking out external noise so you actually stay asleep. But second, your brain uses these spindles to literally weave isolated facts and motor skills, like, say, learning a new guitar chord, into a coherent long-term memory tapestry. Now, if you want to harness those N2 motor learning benefits during the day, but you don't want that horrible deep sleep grogginess, you've got to try the Nappuccino. Here's the play. Drink a cup of coffee and then immediately take a 20-minute nap. Since caffeine takes about 20 minutes to hit your bloodstream, just as that short sleep clears out the sleep-inducing adenosine from your brain, you wake up. And right at that moment, the caffeine slots perfectly into those freshly cleared receptors. It is an absolute game changer for multiplying your alertness. All right, let's plunge a little deeper into section 3, deep sleep, the anabolic chamber of stage N3 and slow wave sleep. During stage N3, your brain is just dominated by these slow, powerful delta waves, and it releases the vast majority of your daily growth hormone. But here's the absolute most crucial part. Deep sleep activates your glymphatic system. Basically, your brain's glial cells literally shrink by 60%. Why? To let cerebrospinal fluid rush in and wash away metabolic waste, specifically amyloid beta, which is a toxic protein heavily linked to Alzheimer's. So when your deep sleep gets fragmented, it actively impairs this neurotoxin clearance. That's a direct, undeniable link between chronic sleep deprivation and neurodegenerative risk. And that brings us to a pretty staggering statistic, 50 to 70%. That number represents the precipitous drop in deep sleep that many adults face by age 60 compared to when they were in their 20s. Deep sleep is incredibly age-sensitive, guys. This massive loss is a huge contributing factor to age-related memory lapses and physical decline, which is exactly why optimizing this specific stage is completely non-negotiable. Which leads us to the final stretch in section 4, REM sleep,
the emotional first aid and the paradoxical storm of neural activity.
As we enter the final third of the night, we hit REM sleep. This is a totally paradoxical state where your muscles are virtually paralyzed, but your brain looks completely awake. Dr. Matthew Walker beautifully coined this emotional first aid. See, REM is literally the only time in your entire 24-hour cycle where your brain is completely devoid of the stress chemical noradrenaline. Without that chemical firing, your brain can safely reactivate and process visceral, painful emotional memories. It strips away the raw anxiety while keeping the actual informational lesson totally intact. To really clearly separate how these stages handle your memory, think of deep sleep as the data transfer cable for your cold hard facts. It's moving data from your brain's short-term USB stick right to its permanent hard drive. REM sleep, on the other hand, that's your ultimate problem solver. It's testing out associative connections between totally unrelated concepts and fusing those disparate emotional dots. That is literally where the phrase "sleep on a problem" comes from. Okay, so how do we actually hack this? That's Section 5, optimizing deep and REM sleep using evidence-based biological protocols. If you want to actively maximize your deep sleep, we can use some clever thermoregulatory hacking through what's called the warm bath effect. By taking a hot bath exactly 90 minutes before bed, you trigger vasodilation, which brings all your blood to the surface of your skin. Then, when you step out of the tub, that heat rapidly dissipates, forcing this massive 1-degree drop in your core body temperature. And guess what? That precise temperature drop is the exact physiological trigger your brain requires to sustain those restorative delta waves. You can even supercharge that deep sleep anabolic chamber with a few specific catalysts. Introducing continuous pink noise, which kind of sounds like a deep rushing waterfall, can actually synchronize with your brain to amplify those delta waves. Also, targeted supplementation about 30 to 60 minutes before bed works wonders. Magnesium bisglycinate is fantastic for temperature regulation and muscle relaxation, while L-theanine helps quiet down a racing mind. Oh, and don't forget, doing moderate aerobic exercise earlier in the day is what builds up that essential adenosine pressure to fuel your drive for deep rest in the first place. Now, optimizing REM is a completely different ballgame. It's all about removing suppressants and actively protecting those fragile late-morning sleep cycles. Because REM happens mostly at the very end of your night, you have to extend your total sleep opportunity window to about 8.5 to 9 hours. If you cut your sleep short, you are literally amputating your REM sleep. You also want a dual microclimate. Keep the room cool for breathing, but use warm blankets because your body actually loses the ability to regulate its own temperature during REM. And most importantly, ruthlessly avoid late-night alcohol. It is an incredibly potent REM suppressant, so skip the nightcap and maybe opt for some tart cherry juice instead for those natural melatonin precursors. Let's bring all of this together in Section 6, the 24-hour sleep blueprint, or as we like to call it, the Sleep Architect Protocol. Because here's the truth, exceptional rest isn't just some bedtime accident. It is an architectural achievement that you build systematically from the absolute second you wake up. You anchor your circadian rhythm with morning sunlight right in your eyes. You build deep sleep pressure with midday exercise. You strictly cut off caffeine by 2 p.m. so you don't block those adenosine receptors. Then, 90 minutes before bed, you drop that core temp with a hot bath. And finally, you slip into a cool room flooded with pink noise. That is the blueprint. So I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on tonight. You now understand the actual underlying architecture of your brain's most vital restorative process. You have the blueprint. The question is, are you going to keep treating your sleep like just some annoying pause in your life? Or are you going to take these tools and master it as your ultimate physiological performance state? Optimize your aging, your creativity, and your profound daily restoration. The choice is entirely yours.